Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
I am Luffy, Partner System Online, One Piece, by Veltoria. Died in sleep, reborn as a child Luffy. No crew, no powers, just pain and a grindy system. To grow stronger, he must level up others. Each powered-up partner unlocks anime abilities. Fairy tale magic, soul blades, one-hit swords. With friendship, Hellgarp training, and a game UI, he's grinding his way to Pirate King in a darker One Piece world. Adios. Bittersweet.
I've got 700,000 gold left. If I used it all to strengthen Robin, Luffy stared at the long list of items in the system shop and gave a firm command. System, bring up the partner equipment tab. As you wish. With a flash of white light, 6 items appeared neatly before him. Technically, it was one set of gear, but color-coded into 2 styles. A pair of black glasses and a pair of white ones. A black shirt and a white one. A pair of black cloth shoes and a white pair. Luffy scratched his head and gave a dry chuckle. This feels kinda random. He tapped on the black glasses with his thoughts. Partner equipment, head, stamina 10, strength 10. Price, 10,000 gold. He checked the white glasses next. Partner equipment, head, agility 10, mental power 10. Price, 10,000 gold. Luffy couldn't help but frown. Not only were the designs basic, but even the item names were plain. The only thing not half-baked was the price. The remaining 4 items followed the same logic. Partner equipment, body, and partner equipment, feet, each with black versions that boosted stamina and strength, and white ones that boosted agility and mental power. Luffy eyed the simplistic icons in the store with doubt. Would Robin even wear something this ugly? She might just reject it altogether. Well, let's test it first. He spent 10,000 gold on the black glasses, the only piece he thought didn't look completely awful. Pulling it from his inventory, he found himself holding a pair of round, Harry Potter-style glasses. Surprisingly, they were weightless. System, how do I enhance this? Is it the same as using an evolution stone? Luffy asked, trying the glasses on and off. After purchasing equipment, the host can access the partner equipment screen to equip, enhance, star up, and evolve items. Partner screen, Luffy opened the partner tab. Sure enough, next to Zoro, Nami, and Robin's headgear slots was a flashing little symbol. Clicking Robin's, a window popped up to select available equipment. Naturally, only the black glasses were listed. He equipped them. Instantly, the glasses adjusted size, reshaping slightly to fit Robin's facial features more naturally. Back in the shop, Luffy bought a single enhancement stone and applied it. Ding! Enhancement successful. The system chime rang out, but the glasses themselves didn't change. Luffy checked the item info. The only visible change. The name now read. Partner equipment, head 1. No attribute changes. Luffy frowned. Didn't it say enhancing made it stronger? Enhancing increases stats by 1% per level. If the increase is less than 1, it won't be displayed. For significant changes, it is recommended to raise both star level and rank before enhancing. Star upgrades, Luffy gritted his teeth. He bought 5 star stones and 1 evolution stone, spending a whopping 150,000 gold in total. He dumped them all into the glasses. With a glow of light, the item's appearance didn't change, but the stats certainly did. Partner equipment, head 1. Stamina 60. Strength 60. Skill 1. Can change appearance into any head accessory according to the wearer's wishes. Luffy blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected much, but even so, spending 150k for a cosmetic feature. He recalled the evolution stone's description. Each evolution grants a new skill. What if the next one just gave glitter? A chill ran down his spine. Did I just get scammed? Ding. No need to worry, host. All partner equipment gains the shape-shifting skill upon first evolution. After reaching tier 3, the item binds to the wearer and unlocks a unique, exclusive skill. Exclusive skill. Correct. A skill tailored to the specific partner. Well, now I'm really curious. Licking his lips, Luffy did some mental math. One evolution costs 150,000. I've got 550,000 gold left. That's enough for 3 more. Gold can be earned again. I doubt the system would scam me. Taking the plunge, Luffy pushed forward. Gold remaining, 400,000. Skill 2, 5% all element resistance. Gold remaining, 250,000. Skill 3, 10% damage absorption. Last one, Luffy said, eyes gleaming as he stared at the 5-star stones and 1 evolution stone left in his bag. The system didn't disappoint. The second and third evolution skills were beyond what he'd hoped for. 5% elemental resistance meant any attack tied to an element, fire, lightning, etc., would be reduced by 5%. With 3 pieces of equipment, that could be a 15% cut to all elemental damage. Then there was 10% damage absorption across the board. Any attack, no matter the type, would be less effective by a 10th. Luffy grinned from ear to ear, imagining Robin turning into a tanky shield maiden. But halfway through his smile, he froze. Wait a minute. These high-tier bonuses were useless to him. He couldn't even equip the gear. Joy drained from his face. He sighed in defeat. Fine, whatever. I get it, I lose if I take this too seriously. After 5-star ups and 1 evolution, Luffy reopened the item stat screen. Partner equipment, Head 1. Stamina 212. Strength 212. Skill 1. Morphs into any headgear style the wearer imagines. Skill 2. 5% all element resistance. Skill 3, 10% damage absorption. Skill 4, 50% sensory perception. Bound to Nico Robin. Luffy couldn't believe his eyes. Robin's exclusive skill was 50% sensory perception. That was huge. Robin's flower fruit wasn't just about growing giant arms, it let her manifest limbs anywhere within her sensing range. In the original story, she easily restrained Cavendish in his Kameidachi sleepwalking berserker form in Dressrosa, an opponent so fast even Bartolomeo couldn't see him clearly. Yet Robin had targeted him precisely. Which meant her perception abilities were already insane, and now they were getting a 50% boost. She might even be able to keep up with Kizaru's light speed movements now. Well, assuming she could eventually learn to code her abilities in armament hockey like Luffy did in Gear 4th. All things considered, yeah. Still a long way to go. Luffy turned the pair of glasses over in his hand, marveling at how something so plain and unassuming could hold such immense power. Well, no point holding back now. Without hesitation, Luffy spent the remaining 100,000 gold or so on enhancement materials, 5-star up gems and 54 enhancement stones. And just like that, Robin's personal equipment upgrade project came to a close. Companion gear, Head 10. Stamina 286. Strength 286. Perfect. With these stats, Robin should meet the minimum requirements to start training armament hockey. Luffy laughed in satisfaction. He glanced up at the sky. Yeesh. Pitch black, can't see a thing. Looking around the ship, Luffy mumbled, Robin's probably not asleep yet, meh, I'll tell her tomorrow. To avoid another awkward situation like before, Luffy decided to save the surprise. And so, amid the endless sea of mist, Luffy sat idly on the deck and slowly dozed off without realizing it. Luffy, Luffy. Somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, Luffy heard someone calling his name. The voice was soft and sweet, like honeyed peach wine flowing gently into his ears. It lulled him deeper into restful slumber. Sigh. Robin looked down at the sleeping Luffy, shaking her head with a resigned smile. Just as quickly, her expression changed. Her lips curled into a mischievous grin, eyes narrowing like a sly fox. Clearly, that gentle sigh had just been part of the act. She reached out and grabbed Luffy's cheeks. Luffy, time to wake up. With both hands kneading his face, Robin seemed quite pleased with herself. Wah! Luffy's mouth was stretched all the way to his ears, and his cheeks were flushed red. Slowly, his eyes blinked open, then closed, then opened again. Robin, what's going on? He murmured groggily, still half asleep. Nothing, oh wait, look around you, Luffy. Robin quickly hid her hands behind her back and smiled as if nothing had happened. Luffy wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth and rubbed his eyes, finally starting to come to. He looked around, but everything still seemed the same. The thick purple mist was still everywhere, obscuring anything beyond it. Robin, watching him stare blankly, pointed forward with a smirk. "Look over there, Luffy." He walked to the bow and squinted into the distance. Far ahead, a giant mouth slowly emerged from the fog, moving steadily toward their ship. "Ooh, looks like we made it," Luffy shouted excitedly at the eerie sight. "Huh, made it where?" "Robin, raise the sails, straight ahead at full speed." Robin wasn't sure where they were going, but seeing Luffy so excited, she was happy just to follow his lead. "Aye aye, Captain." With some quick adjustments, the ship surged forward toward the gaping mouth. Right, Luffy suddenly remembered. Before he fell asleep, he'd spent all his savings crafting the ultimate gift for Robin. He pulled out the glasses from his pocket. "Here, Robin, got something for you." In his palm rested a cute pair of round frame glasses. Robin blushed slightly. In that moment, the fog, the eerie sea, the terrifying maw, they all faded from her mind. She accepted the gift and gently put it on. It fit perfectly. She smiled tenderly, about to say something. But suddenly, a strange energy surged from the glasses and flowed through her body. Robin knew this sensation well. The last time she'd felt it was under the moonlight, when Luffy had slipped a magical ring onto her finger. So these glasses, they weren't ordinary either. Robin looked at Luffy, who was grinning from ear to ear. "Feel anything?" he asked eagerly. After all, he'd sunk every last coin into this gift. Robin beamed, flashing a bright smile. "Thank you, Luffy." She was getting stronger. She wondered when she'd finally be able to truly help him. "Oh, these glasses are super cool, they can turn into any kind of headgear you want," Luffy explained casually. Robin's eyes widened. The glasses began to shift, first into a mask, then a headband, before finally returning to their original form. She chose to keep them that way, perhaps so she could always remember this moment. Luffy didn't think much of it. Meanwhile, the ship neared the enormous mouth. Creak, creak, creak. Mechanical sounds echoed as the massive jaws opened wide, sucking in seawater, and the Thousand Sunny with it. "Luffy," Robin called, a bit nervously. "Relax," he said calmly. "We're fine." To reassure her, Luffy pulled her close and gave her a firm pat on the shoulder. The ship rocked violently as it was pulled inside, tossing about in the waves until it finally slammed into land with a loud thud, forced to a stop. Luffy leapt off the ship in a single bound. Robin followed, some two soft pink wings behind her and gliding gracefully down. "This is the place," Luffy exclaimed. Robin took in their surroundings. The thick fog blanketed everything in a spooky gloom. The forest ahead was pitch black, and eerie rustling sounds whispered from within. Unable to hold back her curiosity any longer, Robin asked the question that had been on her mind. "Luffy, where exactly are we?" She stepped closer to him, intentionally or not. Luffy scanned the area and replied slowly, "This is the domain of a once great pirate." "A pirate?" Robin frowned. "Who would live in such a desolate place?" "Yeah, a fallen pirate. This entire island is actually his ship. He fought Kaido in the New World, lost everything, his crew, his pride. He's been hiding out here ever since, too scared to show his face again." As they walked deeper into the forest, Luffy explained everything he remembered to Robin. Despite the grim setting, the two of them chatted casually as they moved forward, unbothered by the creepy atmosphere. Listening to Luffy's voice, Robin felt like the darkness around them began to lose its edge. The fearsome aura was fading, shrinking, becoming insignificant. Strange, this was the first time she'd ever felt this kind of emotion toward someone. Was it because she had grown stronger? Robin looked down at her hands, then back at Luffy. "Number," she thought with a smile. "It's because the one walking beside me is him. FSSHH, FSSHH, FSSHH. Moria-sama, the body is ready," said a strange, chubby man with bizarre proportions. His upper body was as wide as a water tank, while his legs were stick-thin like a pair of chopsticks. A fishnet covered his torso, stretched awkwardly over a skin-tight suspender outfit, and he wore a ridiculously flamboyant purple cape lined with fur. He clapped his hands, and two mummified figures, bandaged from head to toe, slowly wheeled in a surgical gurney. The man's face twitched, surgical scars running across his forehead and connecting both temples. His long, sharp nose puffed out air as he respectfully addressed the massive silhouette looming in front of him. Moria-sama, this is the legendary dragon-slaying warrior from Wano, Ryuma, and his blade, the famed black sword Shisui, one of the 21 great swords. On the surgical table lay a corpse dressed in a white kimono, each sleeve embroidered with the kanji for dragon. His hair was white, his body wrapped in bandages like a mummy, with a third of his head covered. Beside him rested a pitch-black sword veined with crimson, Shisui. Gahihihihihi. Hurry up and make me the pirate king. Hogback. Gahihihihihi. Cackled a massive figure as it stepped from the shadows, laughter echoing eerily. He was over 7 meters tall, with a flaming leek-like hairstyle. His demonic face bore horns on either side of his forehead, and his ears and fangs were sharply pointed. Stitches crossed his head and neck like seams on a ragdoll. He wore a high-collared batwing shirt and Gothic-style clothing. This was none other than the once feared pirate of the New World, Gecko Moria. Once brimming with confidence and chasing his dreams, Moria had fought Kaido in a battle that left him broken and alone. Defeated, he retreated back to the paradise side of the Grand Line, far from the New World. Now 44 years old, he still lived like a pirate tyrant, but who could say what truly lingered in his heart? Moria-sama. This corpse is totally not cute. I don't like it. I want a cute doll corpse. Whined a small girl beside him, stomping her foot. She wore a princess dress, a crown atop her head, and had bright pink twin tails. In her hands was a zombie teddy bear plushie. Gahihihihi. Next time, Perona, Moria replied with a chuckle. This time we're making a truly powerful zombie general. After a short laugh, Moria turned to Hogback and asked, "Where's Absalom?" With a greasy grin, Hogback replied, "I heard a new ship arrived. He went to check if there were any beauties aboard to make his bride." FSSHHFSSHHFSSHH. Apparently amused by his own joke, Hogback burst into laughter. Moria simply nodded and let it go. He gave an order into the distance, "Bring him down." At once, Moria-sama. A raspy voice answered. Clang 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 clang. Chains rattled as a black coffin in the shape of a vampire slowly descended from the castle above. The eerie castle, the ominous coffin, and the twisted figures below made for a truly unsettling sight. The coffin gradually approached Moria. Thud. With a heavy thump, the black coffin landed. 2 mummified zombies stepped forward and slowly opened the lid. Inside was a skeleton dressed in a full evening suit, tied tightly with ropes. His large afro wobbled as the coffin cracked open and he tumbled out. He was all bones, no flesh at all, and for a moment it seemed like he might shatter into pieces from the fall. "Ugh," Perona muttered, wrinkling her nose. "Totally not cute." Gahihihihihi. Moria's ghoulish laughter rang out again as he patted Perona's head without commenting further. Then, the skeleton stirred. His skull lifted off the floor, hollow eye sockets glowing an eerie green. He opened his mouth and said, "Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho. Phew, looks like I've escaped. Good evening, everyone." The skeleton, Brook, user of the Yomi Yomi no Mi revive fruit, let out a soft sigh and cheerfully greeted the others. Then he added, "Oh, by the way, I ran into some zombies earlier. Scared me half to death." He paused dramatically. "Even though I don't have a heart. Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho." Perona scowled. Watching him crack lame jokes, she grumbled in disgust, "Gross. Moria-sama, you're not seriously planning to use him, are you?" The usually ghost-loving Perona expressing disgust at a skeleton surprised even Hogback, and slightly Moria as well. Still, Moria replied dotingly, "Gahihihihihi. Then let's rip out his shadow and toss him into the devil's sea to rot. Shine the light on him." Hogback ordered the zombies behind him. Click. A blinding spotlight hit Brook. One of the zombies stepped forward and hooked a clasp into the ropes binding him. The hook's line rose, lifting Brook into the air. His tall frame cast a long shadow under the intense light. Hey, what are you doing? Put me down," Brook shouted, finally realizing he'd escaped one nightmare only to fall into another. After wandering the Devil's Sea for over 40 years, he'd finally found an island, only to be chased by horrifying zombies the moment he arrived. He screamed like mad and ran for his life. Eventually, everything went dark, and he found himself locked in a box. When humans opened the box, he was thrilled. It had been over 40 years since he last spoke to anyone. But now, he realized he might have celebrated too soon. Gahihihihihi. Moria snipped a giant pair of scissors ominously. Brook trembled in fear. Though he had no eyes, the green flames flickering inside his skull pulsed with anxiety. With a casual motion, Moria reached toward the ground and lifted Brook's shadow from it. The dark shape clung to his feet like a stretched thread. "Hey, who are you? What do you think you're doing?" Brook yelled. Gahihihihi. FSSHHFSSHHFSSHH. Hurrah hurrah hurrah. The surrounding zombies joined in, laughing creepily in unison. Rustle. Luffy forcefully tore through the branches and shrubs blocking his and Robin's path. Suddenly, a cold, eerie graveyard appeared before them. "Ooh," Luffy exclaimed cheerfully, staring at a large tree and a unicorn, both caught mid-poker game and now frozen stiff like statues, pretending to be inanimate after being discovered. This place was the infamous Thriller Bark, a terrifying zombie paradise. Yet to Luffy, it felt more like a childhood trip to the zoo, curiosity bubbling up inside him, wanting to see everything, touch everything. He glanced left and right at the bizarre-looking undead creatures around them. A bold idea suddenly sprang to life in his mind. "I'm gonna beat Moria and test things out properly." Luffy could hardly wait to conquer the island. Just then, a flurry of footsteps echoed from ahead. "Hurry, he's waking up," Lady Perona said to toss him into the Florian Triangle. "We can't make her sad." "But, won't he die if we dump him in the sea?" "Idiot. Just put him on a boat." "Oh, right." Three odd squirrel-like creatures darted past some distance away from Luffy and Robin, chattering away while carrying something. Apparently too engrossed in conversation, they didn't notice the two at all. "Hey, I heard Absalom-sama said another poor soul landed on the island." "Yup, and apparently there's a girl too." Absalom-sama went to check her out. "Still the same old Absalom-sama, huh?" Their voices faded as the trio of gossipy squirrel things disappeared. Robin glanced over her shoulder. Behind her, Luffy was holding onto a bloodied, gagged monster by a vine leash. The creature wore extravagant clothes but had a hideous beast-like face, wild blonde hair, and a grotesquely large mouth full of jagged teeth. Earlier, as she and Luffy wandered through the forest, Robin had sensed something off in the air. Suddenly, Luffy, who had been walking ahead, threw a punch behind Robin without warning. The creature revealed itself and collapsed instantly. He might be useful, Luffy had said before tying him up and dragging him along like a pet. "Hey Robin, look over there." Luffy suddenly pointed ahead, laughing. Robin followed his gaze, and her eyes widened. In the center of the island stood a massive, ominous castle. Towering above it were three colossal wooden masts piercing the sky. From each mast hung a massive sail. The central sail was painted jet black, bearing the image of a flaming bat-like skull. The whole structure was, in fact, one enormous pirate ship. Robin was completely stunned. Even though Luffy had told her about it, seeing it with her own eyes was something else entirely. She stared at the flapping sails and whispered, "So this is Thriller Bark?" "Yeah," Luffy replied, a little impressed himself. "It's incredible. Anyone who could command such a ship clearly wasn't ordinary." But still, Luffy straightened up, eyes shining with determination as he looked toward the sky. "One day, we'll have an even better ship. One that carries our dreams and takes us across these seas." "Dreams?" Robin murmured, confused. "Yeah, your dream too, Robin." Robin paused. In the past, she had only lived because Saul once told her that as long as she survived, something good would eventually happen. And he was right, she had survived. But what about now? What dreams did she have? Visions of her mother and Professor Clover flashed in her mind. Was it the truth of history she longed for? No, not just that. Then what was it? She looked into Luffy's clear, bright eyes, so warm, yet so powerful. "I know what I want now." Robin smiled softly and whispered, "I hope I get to board that ship soon." "You will, very soon." "Ah, my back hurts. Even though I technically don't have a back." Brook groaned, slowly regaining consciousness and realizing he had been dumped back onto his ship. He stood up and patted his bony body, everything seemed intact. Wait, that creepy guy. Suddenly, memories came rushing back. Just before he blacked out, he saw Moria grinning maniacally, holding giant scissors and slicing away Brook's shadow. He looked down, sure enough, no shadow. He rushed to a mirror. Nothing. I can't lose my shadow, Brook muttered seriously for once. He didn't know that losing his shadow meant death under sunlight, but his soul instinctively screamed one thing: I must get my shadow back. Meanwhile, Luffy casually pushed open the massive castle doors. With Robin by his side, he dragged the unconscious Absalom inside. Back in the graveyard, a pile of corpses had appeared, every one of them twisted and bent at odd angles, unable to move. Suddenly, a round, pudgy head slipped off the top of the pile and hit the ground with a thud. Ouch! In a bizarre turn, the head spoke. It spun around to look at its surroundings and screamed, "Hey! Wake up, everyone! I can't move!" One by one, the corpses opened their eyes. The quiet graveyard turned into a chaotic marketplace. "Help! I'm stuck! Who's on top of me? Somebody, I can't move! What the heck happened?" Dozens of zombies all started whining at once. The round-headed one tried to recall, "I think, a guy and a girl came into the graveyard. We tried to ambush them. Hid underground, and then, bam, suddenly couldn't move. Next thing I knew, I blacked out." Disjointed as it was, that was all he could remember. Earlier, as Luffy and Robin walked through the graveyard, Luffy had sensed these dim-witted zombies long before they made a move. Since they were half-buried and not doing much, he ignored them. But just as the two were about to leave the graveyard, the zombies suddenly jumped out, startling Robin, who had been focused on inspecting Luffy's hair. In response, she unleashed 100 flower bloom, petals swirling as dozens of elegant arms sprouted and twisted every zombie's joints. They were immobilized, yet still fully conscious, instantly turning into a noisy mess. Annoyed by the racket, Luffy silenced them with a blast of Conqueror's Haki, overkill, like using a cannon to kill mosquitoes. A pitiful bunch, really. Chapter 75, Ryuma. Luffy, I feel like someone's watching us. Robin had been feeling uneasy ever since they entered the castle. After walking in silence for a while, she finally spoke up. Huh. Luffy turned and looked at her, surprised. He hadn't expected Robin's senses to be this sharp. Was it because of her glasses? She hadn't mastered observation Haki yet. Was this just instinct? How strange. You mean someone's watching us? Luffy pointed up at the wall above the fireplace, where a pig's head was mounted. He grinned and waved. Look at that pig head. It's staring right at us. Hee hee. Hello there. Eek. The pig head instantly broke out in a cold sweat, squeezed its eyes shut, and began chanting in its mind. You can't see me. You can't see me. I'm not here. As for his duty as a zombie captain, that was a joke. Even Absalom was being dragged around like a dead dog. Resisting wouldn't end well. The lion-head captain kept his eyes tightly shut, fervently trying to convince himself he was invisible, like some devout zealot clinging to blind faith. Unfortunately, if there really were gods in this world, none of them heard his prayer. Luffy walked up to the fireplace, clenched his fist, and placed it on top of the lion-head captain's skull. With a tone of mock annoyance, he said, Hey. I said hello, and you ignored me. Then he twisted his knuckles on the lion-head's forehead. Hello. The lion-head stammered in panic. Sweat rolled down his cheeks, though technically he had no real sense of pain. Still, the moment Luffy touched him, he felt a chilling premonition of death. That's more like it. Luffy gave him a nod of approval, as if saying, Smart kid, I like that. Then he grabbed both sides of the lion-head's face and began stretching his mouth wide, up, down, left, right, playing with it like it was made of rubber. All around them, the zombie wall paintings and carpet bear zombies remained perfectly still, pretending to be lifeless decorations. As Luffy played, he suddenly had a strange sense of déjà vu. He stretched the lion-head's mouth back all the way to his ears, then snap. Let go. The lion-head's skin bounced back several times like elastic before slowly returning to its original shape. He didn't dare make a sound. Luffy glanced back at Robin in confusion. That scene, it felt oddly familiar, like something he'd experienced before. Meanwhile, Robin had her hands folded behind her back, pretending to examine the nearby decor as if nothing had happened. But the playful glint in her eyes that kept sneaking peeks at Luffy completely betrayed her. Luffy's brow twitched. Robin, you've changed. Boom. Just as Luffy was about to give Robin a serious, talking to, a huge crash echoed through the castle as the inner doors exploded open. A samurai in a white bathrobe stepped out slowly. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of his wooden sandals echoed crisply on the stone floor. The Grand Line, the Red Line, and the Wine of Labunkinks. He murmured nonsense and occasionally hummed as he walked forward. Clack, clack. Just as he was about to exit the castle, his aura suddenly shifted. The confusion vanished, replaced not by vitality, but by an eerie stillness. Like a fresh bud withering in an instant, it lost all life, yet began to nourish the earth with a deeper essence. The samurai slowly lifted his head, eyes glowing with ghostly fire, and spoke. I am under Moria-sama's command, dragon-slaying swordsman, Ryuma. Yo-ho-ho-ho-ho. That goofy voice and weird laugh instantly reminded Luffy of someone. Someone he had never met in this world. Ryuma, the zombie swordsman, turned to face them and unsheathed the legendary black blade, Shisui. Yo-ho-ho-ho. You must be the pirates who just arrived. Moria-sama gave orders to capture you. Yo-ho-ho-ho. Oh. Luffy casually tossed the lion head captain aside and studied the zombie before him, clearly just imbued with a new shadow. Ryuma, freshly reanimated, didn't recognize Absalom, one of the 3 weirdos, who was frantically trying to signal him. He simply assumed Absalom was a captive zombie, especially since the guy looked even uglier than most zombies. Yo-ho-ho. Before we begin the fight, just one question. Ryuma suddenly asked with mock seriousness. Miss, may I take a look at your panties? Snap. Before Robin could respond, Luffy's fist clenched, flames of sky flame hockey igniting over his hand. He lowered his head, eyes dark with fury, and strode toward Ryuma. Looks like Luffy's, a little angry, Robin thought sweetly as she prepared to strike. But Ryuma didn't care. His sword was drawn, there was no turning back. He struck first. The gap between them closed quickly. Luffy raised his flaming fist to meet him. Clang! A loud clash of steel rang out. Luffy froze, then calmly lowered his fist and extinguished the flame. Yo-ho-ho-ho, leave this one to me, young man. Brook dropped from above, intercepting Ryuma's strike. Luffy glanced up and noticed a tiny hole in the ceiling. Only Brook's skeletal frame could have slipped through that. Still, he was impressed. Brook had even evaded his observation haki. Guess I need to figure out how to extend my haki to cover above me, Luffy thought. While Luffy pondered, the 2 swordsmen were already locked in combat. Clang, 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 their blades clashed in a rapid flurry. Yo-ho-ho-ho, that's the best you've got. Ryuma laughed mockingly. Damn it, you're using my sword techniques, how are you stronger than me? Brook struggled, steadily losing ground. Then, just as Brook faltered, Ryuma suddenly withdrew his sword and vanished behind him. Brook's eyes widened in disbelief. Clack, clack. Ryuma walked past, sheathing Shisui slowly. Hinata Sancho, Yahazujiri. Slice. Brook's chest exploded in a burst of cloth, his bones bending under the force as if struck by a heavy blow. Ryuma tilted his head slightly, the glowing void of his eye sockets glancing back at Brook. I have your sword style, your techniques, and this dragon-slaying warrior's body. You can't defeat me. I only used the back of the blade. If you died, it would be inconvenient. Damn it, give me back my shadow. Brook collapsed to the ground, unwilling to accept defeat. Yo-ho-ho-ho. Well then, I suppose it's your turn now. Zombie Ryuma's withered face crinkled into a smile that bloomed like a daisy. Even without looks, he grinned with full confidence. Luffy looked down at Brook lying on the floor and asked curiously, Hey, you okay, skeleton? Brook's skeletal frame twitched slightly. His jawbone trembled as he managed to speak, despite lacking vocal cords. His voice was raspy and unsteady. I'm fine. Yo-ho-ho-ho, cough, cough. Just a little, tight in the chest, though I don't have one. Supporting himself with one hand on the floor, Brook picked up his cane sword with the other. He still seemed determined to fight. Luffy blinked at him, speechless. He'd just been thoroughly thrashed, and he still had the energy to crack a joke. Yep, Brook was clearly comic relief. Struggling to his feet, Brook raised his sword and pointed it at zombie Ryuma, then turned to Luffy and Robin. Young man, you should run quickly. There's someone truly terrifying on this island. His hand trembled as he spoke. Brook didn't know who Luffy really was. To him, they just seemed like some random pirates who'd gotten lost. He was trying to protect them, afraid they'd end up like him, shadows stolen by that demon of a man. Luffy grinned and casually waved off Ryuma's presence, saying to Brook, "You're a pretty nice skeleton, you know that. Wanna join my crew?" What? Brook and Robin shouted at the same time, both startled and disbelieving. Luffy, however, was serious. He liked Brook, not just for his humor or his music, but for his powers. The revive fruit was proof that the afterlife existed in this world. And Brook's future potential was incredible. He'd eventually learn to channel the power of the underworld itself, wrapping his soul around his sword and delivering attacks on a mental power level. Very few people in the world could do that. Luffy noticed Robin's mild disapproval and smiled at her. "He's funny, right?" Robin's expression twitched slightly. She forced a smile. "Why yeah, he is." She didn't dislike Brook. It was just, until now, it had been just her and Luffy. If someone else joined the crew, Robin felt like her chances to be alone with Luffy would disappear. Brook, still battered and broken, suddenly felt a chill deep within. He didn't have a heart, but his soul was trembling. "I'm doomed, aren't I?" Yo-ho-ho-ho, what a rare and touching scene. But let's save the sentiment until after you meet Moria-sama. Zombie Ryuma, clearly annoyed at being ignored, cut into the conversation. He raised the black blade Shisui and pointed it at Luffy and Robin. As for the exhausted, wild-haired skeleton behind him, Ryuma didn't even bother with him. A cold gleam flashed in the air. The heavy black blade traced a blood-red arc through space, as if slicing through time itself. Ryuma's body vanished into the strike, unleashing the sword technique etched into his soul. Hinata Sanch. Clang. A sharp, metallic ring echoed through the hall. Ryuma's and Brook's ghostly flames flickered at the same time. Their hollow eyes widened in shock, as if witnessing the impossible. Robin smiled faintly, as if she'd seen this coming. Luffy spoke calmly. "That move of yours was a quick draw strike, right? Too bad, it was too slow." He opened his hand, letting go of the black blade he'd just caught mid-swing. Not a scratch marked the pitch-black X-glove he wore. Ryuma staggered back 3 steps, his whole body trembling slightly. He hadn't used his full strength in that attack, but for someone to catch it barehanded. That was all he needed to know. Luffy was powerful. Taking a deep breath, Ryuma steadied himself. The fire in his eyes calmed. He raised his sword again and said, "Yo-ho-ho-ho, looks like I've met someone remarkable today." Even in danger, his voice kept that smug, annoying tone, as if sorrow could never touch him. Luffy shook out his arm. The impact had still stung a bit. Phew. A flame ignited in his hand. His pupils shimmered, reflecting the fire's glow. Where once his irises were simply black and white, they now gleamed in layered shades of orange and gold, like twin suns. Luffy tried to calm himself. He'd been experimenting, trying to control the fire by suppressing his emotions. But no matter how he tried, a stubborn flame kept flickering inside, throwing off his focus. "It's still not working," he muttered in disappointment, staring at the fire in his palm. As soon as he spoke, the flame flared even more violently. Ryuma, sword raised, noticed the instability in Luffy's aura. Watching the flame waver, he asked, "You're trying to master your emotional state, aren't you?" Luffy looked up, surprised. The fire trembled again. "How did you know?" Ryuma chuckled, his voice calm for once. "Because it's a path all swordsmen must walk." For a moment, Ryuma was no longer the cheerful zombie. His tone turned solemn, aged, like a seasoned warrior from ages past. Like the dragon-slaying swordsman he once was. "Every swordsman, if they wish to become a true master," he said, "must understand one thing, the breath of all things. And the best way to grasp that breath is through sword meditation. That means mastering your own heart, so your body can listen to the world, and your blade can touch all things. I noticed your mental power flares and fades, your will is unsteady. Just now, you were close to reaching that state. But you weren't satisfied, were you? It seems, you're searching for something beyond even that." Ryuma stopped speaking and stood still, no longer eager to fight. He understood clearly, he wasn't Luffy's match. Maybe when he was alive, they could have had a real duel, but now. Better to wait. Maybe this young man would show him something truly astonishing. Luffy closed his eyes and stood silently, reflecting on Ryuma's words. He'd never really connected swordsmanship with emotional control before. Maybe he'd heard of it, but he never paid it much attention. In the original story, Zoro had learned the breath of all things through battle. Luffy had never thought to apply that concept to himself. But now, after Ryuma's explanation, he realized something: he'd been going about it all wrong. He'd been trying to smother the flame inside him, to erase all thought and emotion. But the moment he tried, the fire already existed. No matter how faint, it still gave off heat. But if he followed a swordsman's path, no, not just feel all things. He had to become all things. Luffy's eyes slowly opened, calm and gentle. The flame in his hand shrank, bit by bit, until it dissolved into glowing embers that drifted to the ground. A small smile formed on his lips. He crossed his arms over his chest and dropped into a Bruce Lee-style stance. With a peaceful tone, he said, "All right, let's go again, all right." Zombie Ryuma shifted his stance, aiming the tip of the black blade Shisui directly at Luffy. Since the outcome was already clear, there was no reason to hold back. For this final moment, he would give it his all and fight to his heart's content. Abade coup droit, prelude au fer, gavotte bond en avant. Poka remise. Swallow bond en avant. The black blade shimmered and split into countless mirage-like copies. Dazzling sword light filled the air like stars, flooding toward Luffy. Each strike was as fast and sharp as a bolt of lightning, far too quick for the eye to follow. Luffy's gaze twitched slightly, then returned to its serene stillness, calm as a quiet lake. Facing the incoming flurry of stabs that formed a dense web of sword energy, Luffy simply extended two fingers, arms dancing in motion. His hands moved so fast they seemed to multiply, one by one tapping the sword tips, blocking every strike Ryuma launched. At that moment, the classic duel of shield versus spear began. Clang, clang, cling, clang. The sharp ringing of metal on metal echoed in chaotic harmony. Gradually, the rhythm of blades thrusting and clashing, the sound of footwork, and the advancing of a swordsman, all blended into a beautiful waltz. It was as if Ryuma were inviting Luffy to dance with him on this battlefield. At the center of the stage, Ryuma advanced aggressively, while Luffy retreated with grace and control. In the thick mist, the moonlight acted like a spotlight, trailing behind the two as they moved in perfect synchronization. Phew! The performance reached its finale. The black blade Shisui, as if exhausted, drooped in silence, its once proud aura faded. Luffy landed lightly from a stone pillar. As he touched down, the pillar shattered with a boom into rubble, sending dust into the air. Boom, boom, boom. A chain reaction had begun. The entire castle started to tremble. Debris and holes littered the surroundings. The once majestic fortress now looked like a ghost of its former glory, ready to collapse at any moment. Gigantsko Mono, 4 trees. Robin spread her arms wide. From the ground sprouted a massive formation of hands, merging into 4 enormous palms that shielded her and Brook. Ah! What is this? Brook hadn't yet recovered from the intense duel between Luffy and Ryuma. Now suddenly trapped inside these giant hands, he panicked and drew his cane sword, ready to slash his way out. Then, a mouth appeared in the center of one palm and snapped, "Don't move, or I'll crush you." Brook shuddered violently. That same terrifying feeling again. But hearing Robin's voice, he slowly relaxed and sheathed his sword. "You're not drawing your blade anymore." Despite the fierce battle, Luffy remained composed. His calm heart had not wavered. Zombie Ryuma shook his head with a bitter smile. "There's no point. After all, this isn't my own swordsmanship." He turned and glanced toward Brook, still shielded inside the giant palm. Then he spoke again. "Next comes my final strike, my strongest. I hope you'll take it seriously." Luffy gave a simple nod, raising both hands to show he was ready. "This is a technique embedded in my body's muscle memory. I don't know its name," Ryuma said softly. "But I hope it earns your respect." With that, Ryuma gripped the black blade tightly in both hands, lifted it over his head, and suddenly charged forward. This time, there was no grace, only weight. Each step fell like a 1,000-pound hammer, crushing the stone beneath. With relentless momentum, Ryuma surged ahead. Then, with a mighty leap, he vaulted high, smashing through the castle roof. He hung in the air, silhouetted against the moonlight. "If you don't have a name," Luffy muttered, "then I'll give you one myself." Sever. Ryuma roared the word as he dove downward, blade first, like a bullet tearing through the sky, headed straight for Luffy. Luffy raised his arms, eyes locked on the descending warrior. Boom. It was like the end of the world. The impact split the castle down the middle. A deep chasm tore through the floor beneath, bisecting everything in its path. The load-bearing walls gave way. The entire structure collapsed in an instant. At the bottom of the gorge stood Luffy, arms crossed, catching Ryuma's black blade. His hands trembled slightly from the pressure. His eyes flickered, now bright, now dim. Where they once blazed, now flickered a subdued intensity. Tiny sparks danced around his gauntlets, like stars. "You're losing control, aren't you?" Ryuma bared his teeth and laughed, pouring every last ounce of strength into the strike. Luffy said nothing. Or perhaps, he couldn't. Under the crushing pressure of Ryuma's slash, he could feel it again, that spark of fire inside his heart, starting to burn. "Don't suppress it. Let it out," Ryuma shouted. "This isn't about extinguishing your mental power. A true swordsman pours their whole being into their blade." Even as he pressed down harder, Ryuma kept guiding him. To become one with the sword. Luffy fell into brief contemplation. The 0-point breakthrough was meant to reduce death energy to 0, and then go beyond. He'd barely managed to push his aura down to that point, but what came next? To merge with the sword, did that mean projecting oneself through the blade? The early form of 0-point allowed the user to produce ice by suppressing death energy. And that death energy manifested as flame. Flame and ice. That's it. A spark lit behind Luffy's eyes. Fire gives off heat, releasing one's will and fighting mental power outward. But ice draws in heat, it absorbs that energy back into oneself. That's the key. Merge it back into the self. It wasn't about suppressing willpower. It was about controlling how it flowed. Internalizing it. Merging it into the self. Ryuma suddenly felt the resistance vanish. Luffy had stepped back, shedding the pressure. Clang. The black blade scraped along Luffy's gauntlets, sliding free. Ryuma raised his weapon again, then froze. He looked down. A layer of ice had crawled up the blade, shimmering in the moonlight with iridescent color. It had even reached the hilt, robbing Shisui of its usual ominous glow. "Looks like you've succeeded," Ryuma said with a trace of relief. Luffy's eyes had returned to their deep black, but the frosty glint on his gauntlets said his heart was still ablaze with focus. "I wish I could have met you while I was still alive," Luffy murmured softly. Ryuma's hand trembled. He looked down at the now frozen blade and sighed, heavy with regret. "I've lost." "Hey, then come on." Samurai Ryuma spread his arms wide and shouted, "Let this warrior's body feel your strength firsthand. Let me taste defeat, fully and completely." Luffy bowed his head, whispering, "As you wish." His figure vanished. In a blink, he reappeared before Ryuma. Crack, crack. Ice spread from Ryuma's feet and arms, slowly engulfing him. "So this is your power," Ryuma said, eyes calm even as they froze. Such searing cold. And in the final second, his vision faded. The legendary swordsman Ryuma was once again laid to rest, now part of history. A strange shadow slithered out of his mouth and darted toward Brook's feet. Brook looked down, stunned. Then whispered, "My shadow has returned." Ding. Host has defeated zombie Ryuma. Gained 535,489 express and 89,000 gold. Ding. Congratulations. EXP maxed out, beginning level up. Ding. Level up successful. Current level, 27. Phew. Luffy let out a long sigh. With that breath, the intense aura around him seemed to disperse, and his tousled hair settled back down. Compared to the ruthless force he had projected during the battle, he now looked like a completely different person. He assigned his newly earned stat points evenly across strength, agility, intelligence, and endurance, in a balanced 2-3-2-3 pattern. Still, being someone who favored brute force, he did give a little more love to damage-oriented stats. Luffy. Robin dispelled her devil fruit powers with a wave, and the towering giant hands crumbled into a flurry of petals that danced in the air before quietly fading away. Seeing Luffy emerge from the rubble covered in dirt and dust, Robin rushed to his side. Her concern was plain as day. She examined him from head to toe, looking for any injuries as though even a scratch would be unacceptable. Brook, meanwhile, was slumped quietly against a large piece of debris. He had forced himself to his feet earlier despite a serious blow, but ended up re-injuring his spine in the aftershocks of the fight. With only bones left to his name, his spine was all he had. He wanted to stand up and greet his savior, but now clearly wasn't the time. The overwhelming sense of awe from earlier still lingered deep within his soul, and his jawbone trembled as he involuntarily shivered. I should just rest for now, Brook decided wisely. All right, Robin, I'm fine, Luffy said helplessly as Robin kept brushing dirt off his clothes and wiping his face. At this rate, she might start polishing his boots too. Although, looking down at his bulky black boots, maybe they could use a cleaning. Escaping Robin's overly doting care, Luffy looked over at Ryuma's frozen corpse encased in ice, and the sword he had wielded. He couldn't help but shake his head. He had to admit, without Ryuma's guidance, he wouldn't have unlocked the breakthrough to 0 point. It wasn't that he couldn't have ever learned it, but had he tried to figure it out on his own, it might have taken him 6 months or more. Shaking his head in admiration once again, Luffy found it strange. It was the first time he'd accepted help from an enemy. The feeling was oddly complicated. Just as he was lost in thought, Luffy turned toward the rear of the castle. Tap, 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 tap. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echoed from the passage leading deeper into the castle. The sound grew louder and louder. Robin and Brook immediately stood on guard, staring toward the hallway's darkened depths. Moments later, bizarre shapes began emerging from the tunnel. Zombies, some grotesque, some unidentifiable even by Luffy's standards, poured out of the corridor. Strangely, the zombies all lined up neatly along the hallway, standing straight like guards awaiting their king. Chests puffed out, unmoving. Tap, tap, tap. A slower, heavier set of footsteps followed. The zombies stood even straighter, clearly trying to make a good impression. Luffy lifted his gaze slowly. 3 figures were emerging from the passage. Moria's expression had darkened. A vein throbbed on his temple, his lips curled in a snarling grimace, the muscles on his face twitching in rage. When he spotted Luffy standing there calmly, the fury in his chest erupted like a volcano. His anger surged to his head, boiling over. His once grand castle was now a ruin. His recently revived subordinate had been purified. Absalom's fate was unknown. If not for Luffy's overwhelming strength, Moria wouldn't have hesitated to retaliate on the spot. But this wasn't the same cowardly Moria from 10 years in the future, the one too scared to even fight. No, this Moria had only just retreated from the New World, blood still boiling with frustration and vengeance. You're the one who's been causing trouble on my turf. Moria towered over Luffy at more than 7 meters tall, glaring down at him. The ground beneath him rippled with shadow, stretching outward from his feet and disappearing into the rubble. Moria-sama. We found Absalom. Ghost Princess Perona, who had arrived with Moria, immediately deployed her Horo Horo no Mi ghost fruit powers, summoned a swarm of ghosts to scan the ruins. Finally, in a collapsed corner of the castle, they found the surprisingly still alive Absalom, trapped in a triangular wedge of debris. Moria turned his gaze to Perona. With a single look, 4 zombies rushed over and began helping her dig Absalom out from the rubble. Learning that Absalom had survived gave Moria a sense of relief he didn't even realize he was holding. His rage began to subside. Above, the full moon hung high, bathing the ruined battlefield in its quiet light. Under the moonlight, Moria and Luffy, one massive, one small, locked eyes. Moria's aura thickened, trying to suppress Luffy with raw pressure. "Surrender your shadow, brat," he said in a low, menacing voice. "Do that, and maybe I'll let you off with less pain." KKK. Luffy glanced dismissively at a nearby stone slab, then scoffed. Gecko Moria, once a fearsome pirate who rampaged through the New World. Now hiding in this pitiful corner of the sea. He looked up, studying Moria's demonic face. His sharp features, twisted in fury, made his dark presence even more unnerving. But Luffy remained completely unfazed. With a pitying tone, he added, "I heard that during your fight with Kaido, you lost all your comrades." After that, you never dared set foot in the New World again. Some great pirate you turned out to be. Ha ha ha. Luffy's casual mockery struck Moria right in the gut, his face contorting with fury. He wanted nothing more than to punch Luffy square in the jaw. But before Moria could react, Luffy suddenly raised his right arm. A gem embedded in his gauntlet flared to life, shooting flames up his arm and forming a blazing fireball in his palm. What do you think you're doing? Moria's eyes bulged, his expression twisting into a grotesque snarl. He had never expected someone to stare him down under his own aura, and then make the first move. Doppelman. A black shadow burst from a crack in the ground and zipped toward Perona. Moria had swapped places with his shadow in an instant. Luffy unleashed the fireball, an orange blaze cutting through the night like lightning. Boom! The fireball struck Moria's shadow directly. The shadow shattered into fragments and dripped to the ground like liquid. You brat! You've made me angry. Moria's eyes flashed, no longer mocking, but filled with dark rage that flared uncontrollably. Oh, do I have to let you monologue before a fight too? Luffy twisted his body fluidly, his arm rotating in sync. His two-toned eyes shimmered with brilliance as he locked his gaze forward. Sparks swirled in his palm, forming a searing blaze that distorted the air around it, warping the very space with heat. Shadow Asura. Moria cut the talk short this time. With Perona and Absalom behind him, he had no room to dodge, he had to confront this head-on. A dark purple figure appeared instantly in front of him. It matched Moria's height and build, but its edges were sharper, its mouth a hollow void filled with beast-like fangs. Boom! Luffy's fireball surged forward, blazing with heat as it collided with the Shadow Asura. Golden flames burst outward, shining brilliantly, then twisted mid-air like a giant python, jaws wide open. It devoured the Shadow Asura, then, without slowing, shot straight toward Moria himself. But Moria was ready. The moment the Shadow Asura dissolved, a surge of darkness returned to his feet. Bats, fragmented swarm. Acting swiftly, Moria activated his devil fruit again. Countless dark violet bats exploded from his shadow like a storm, flinging themselves into the firestorm. The swarm collided with the flame serpent like moths to a flame, each impact like a phantom strike, and began to merge. The fluttering swarm gradually condensed into a solid wall of darkness, a shield of shadows erected in front of Moria to block the searing assault. Standing behind this shadow wall, Moria gritted his teeth against the waves of heat pouring through. Controlling the shadows took intense focus, and the oppressive force of Luffy's attack made his heart pound uncontrollably. Phoom! The fire serpent slammed into the shadow wall. Heat blasted in every direction, a roaring wave of fire sweeping outward, forcing Robin and the others back nearly 10 meters. As the flames receded, the battlefield looked scorched beyond recognition. Wooden structures had turned to blackened charcoal, wisps of smoke curling upward. The painted zombie murals, immobilized in the castle, were reduced to ash during the clash. Their stolen shadows returned quietly to their rightful owners. Above, the starry sky emerged, the heatwaves having burned away the fog that had blanketed the island. Hiss! A puff of white vapor escaped from Moria's nostrils. His body, unused to battle for so long, now trembled from the strain and excitement. It felt like a return to his prime, when he had sailed the turbulent seas, clashing with countless powerhouses, once ruling a corner of the world. But in the end, he was the only one left. Panting, Moria's demonic eyes never left Luffy, watching warily for the next strike. Luffy, too, caught his breath. His fight with Ryuma had taken a toll, and the zero-point breakthrough had drained him. Following it up with back-to-back attacks had left him spent. This lull was a chance to recover. He glanced behind, Brook lay on the ground, and Robin stood, slightly disheveled. Luffy suddenly lowered his arm and said coolly to Moria, "Let's take this somewhere else." Moria had blocked all of Luffy's previous attacks, but Robin and Brook, unprepared, had been badly affected by the shockwave. Moria's pupils dilated slightly. His bat-like eyes twitched, but he chuckled as if it didn't bother him. "KKK, you're not planning an escape, are you?" "Cut the crap," Luffy snapped. "Or do you want me to see if my next attack can hit that girl behind you?" Moria's sick laughter halted as Luffy waved dismissively. "Che." Moria's eyes twitched, clearly hit where it hurt. He growled, "Hogback, get Perona and Absalom out of here." Now, only those three mattered to him. The rest, the zombies, were just tools. Yes, Moria-sama, Hogback, still pale from the earlier battle, jumped to obey. He hoisted Absalom, grabbed Perona, and bolted. Moria-sama. Perona called out angrily, clearly unwilling to leave. But Moria didn't respond. He'd already stepped out of his usual bounds today, he didn't plan to go further. Robin, you too. Go, Luffy said calmly, glancing over his shoulder. Robin bit her lip, nodded quietly, and left without protest. I'm still too weak, she whispered, fingers brushing the ring on her right hand, frustrated. Brook, clutching his lower back, hurried after her. Luffy bumped his fists together, his gauntlets clanged, the metallic sound cold and sharp. A layer of black hockey enveloped them, swallowing the light around them. He lifted his gaze and grinned at Moria. Now, we can fight for real. Moria's brow twitched. He'd noticed the change in Luffy's arms. In the first half of the Grand Line, few could wrap their armament hockey this tightly, this cleanly. This kid, his fruit powers are terrifying enough, but his physical abilities aren't ordinary either, Moria thought, growing more cautious. He could no longer afford to hold back. Seizing the moment before Luffy struck again, Moria raised a hand toward the distant zombie ranks. Shadow gathering ground. 100 zombies instantly collapsed. Inky shadows peeled away from their bodies and surged toward Moria. With each shadow absorbed, his body swelled. He waved his other hand, and a second 100 shadows flowed in. His upper body ballooned. He now stood over 10 meters tall. His limbs, bulky and grotesque, hunched like a beast. Coupled with his bat-like face, he looked exactly like a demon from legend, one that walked the earth. Brat, you should never have forced me to use this. KKKK. When Moria spoke now, it sounded like a chorus of voices, deep, guttural, and echoing from some abyssal pit. Powered by 200 shadows, Moria could easily punch through a warship. This was how he had once made his name in the New World. Luffy felt it too, this overwhelming power, and his heart stirred with anticipation. For the first time since arriving in this world, he faced a true powerhouse. He dropped into a stance, arms lowered to his sides. He still couldn't fully control the explosive, lightning flame, yet, but the gentler, sky flame, though weaker, was already at his command. Whoosh! Nearly 1,000 points of mental energy poured into his X-gloves. A massive aura erupted from within him. Blazing fire wrapped around his body. A radiant cloak of red flame surrounded him, he looked like a demon of fire incarnate. On the deck of the demonic three-masted ship, two towering figures now stood opposite each other, one in shadows, one in flame. A world-shaking battle was about to begin. So this is Luffy's true power. Robin's eyes flickered with a complex, indescribable emotion as she gazed at the blazing giant in the distance. Towering like a god, he stood face to face with another colossal figure, Moria, cloaked in shadows and demonic power. Brook's hollow eyes widened, his jaw trembling as he pointed at the battlefield, barely able to speak. What are those things? While Robin was getting a deeper glimpse into Luffy's strength, Brook was completely overwhelmed. The sheer magnitude of power displayed by both combatants left him shaken to the core. He had only just entered the Grand Line when he was defeated, and for the next 40 years, he drifted powerlessly through the eerie mists. Never, in all that time, had he seen anything like this. In the heart of the battlefield, winds howled wildly. Gale force gusts whipped through the air, tugging at Luffy's tousled hair. Standing tall within the flames, Luffy's aura surged around him. His mismatched eyes were focused, calm yet filled with an unshakable confidence. Suddenly, he vanished in a blur of light, a streak of crimson fire shooting toward Moria like a bolt of red lightning. The flaming giant behind him mirrored his motion, forming a massive, blazing fist. Serpents of fire lashed outward, twisting and writhing as if they might burn the very sky. Moria let out a cold snort. Shadows surged beneath his feet, spiraling up his body like a dark vortex, coiling around his right arm until they formed a sharp, spear-like spike aimed straight at Luffy's incoming fist. Boom! Scarlet and black collided like two planets crashing into each other. In an instant, the clash erupted with thunderous force, shockwaves exploding outward like a flood breaking its dam. In front of Moria's ruined castle, violent energy lashed out in every direction. Shattered stone rained from the sky. And yet, At the center of the maelstrom, Luffy and Moria stood firm, unmoving. The power radiating from them felt almost divine, untouchable. The blast of force surged toward Robin and the others like a collapsing mountain. Robin reacted immediately. Her hands moved in a flurry, activating the power of the Hana Hana no Mi. Two enormous arms burst from the ground behind her, shielding both herself and Brook from the incoming shockwave. But Perona and Hogback, still in their weakened states, had no such protection. As debris flew toward them like shrapnel, the two could do nothing but curl up tightly, trying to reduce the area exposed to the attack. Hogback, with his tiny round glasses glinting in panic, bit his lip and rolled over Perona, shielding her with his bulky frame. The wind roared past them, pressure so intense it made Hogback's eardrums throb in pain. Still, he didn't flinch. Ignoring the storm, he forced himself to raise his head and glance behind. To his astonishment, Absalom, who had been unconscious until moments ago, now stood behind them, arms spread wide. His beast-like body took the brunt of the flying debris, shielding them completely. Thud. Once the danger had passed and the wind calmed, Absalom collapsed to the ground with a heavy thump, unconscious once again. He hadn't even opened his eyes during the entire ordeal. Absalom. Hogback rushed to his side. Perona, blinking as light returned to her world, gasped at the sight of Absalom's back, riddled with embedded stones, his blood dripping steadily onto the earth. "Help me get him to the operating room," Hogback shouted to the stunned Perona. "He needs immediate treatment." Right. Perona snapped out of it and rushed to help, lifting Absalom's legs. Absalom's body, fully modified with beast parts by Hogback, was far heavier than a normal human's. The two of them struggled to carry him as they navigated the rubble, searching desperately for a way into the castle's surgical chamber. Meanwhile, the storm of energy gradually subsided. The wind stilled. At the feet of Luffy and Moria, a massive crater had formed, over 10 feet deep, while the castle lay in ruin. Moria gritted his sharp teeth. Eyes bulging, he stared at the point where their fists had collided. His shadow spike had shattered under Luffy's crushing blow. Flames were now licking at his arm, scorching his flesh. With a sharp hiss of pain, Moria withdrew his hand. His deformed frame leapt back, legs coiling like springs, creating distance between him and Luffy. Behind him, the flame giant flickered, and then vanished, shrinking down and merging back into Luffy's body. But Luffy's aura didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. His eyes glowed, calm but burning hot. He now understood. The lightning flame was too weak for battles of this caliber. It might allow for large area attacks, but no matter how much energy he poured into it, its destructive power didn't scale. "So I need a stronger flame to fight real opponents," Luffy murmured to himself. Two sparks ignited in his palms. Unlike the golden flames of softness, these burned a fierce, high-temperature orange, the flame of hardness. The flames flared erratically. Luffy was testing, carefully balancing the flow of mental power energy, trying to find the right rhythm to stabilize them. The flames lasted longer and longer. Each burst grew louder, like a beast roaring to life, eager to be unleashed. Moria sensed Luffy was preparing something new, but he remained confident, unshaken. He spread his arms wide and let out a demonic roar that echoed across the entire island. "More shadows, come to me." With that cry, corpses across the island, within the graveyard, castle, forest, and coastline, began to collapse. Black shadows poured from their bodies like smoke, drawn to Moria as if pulled by a magnetic force. 300, 400, 500. Gay ha ha ha. Flame brat, behold my ultimate form. I am the Shadow Master, Gecko Moria. With 500 shadows absorbed, Moria's body swelled to over 30 meters tall. But the immense concentration of power in his upper body left him unable to stand upright. He crouched on all fours, eyes bloodshot, mouth split wide in a savage grin, his jagged fangs gleaming. He was no longer man or demon, just a monstrous beast drunk on power. But this form couldn't last long. He needed to end it quickly. Seeing Luffy still focused on refining his flames, Moria didn't hesitate. With a roar, he swung a mountain-sized fist, tearing through the air with brutal force. Luffy, not yet ready to counter, had only just managed to gather a stable flicker of the lightning flame. He crossed his arms in front of him, trying to shield himself. The pressure bore down like a collapsing sky. He couldn't even raise his head. Then, boom! Moria's punch sent Luffy flying like a comet. He streaked across the graveyard, crashing through the forest, toppling trees in a straight line as he disappeared into the distance. Luffy. Seeing Luffy blasted away by Moria's monstrous punch, Robin screamed, her voice torn with anguish. Without hesitation, she sprinted in the direction where he had fallen. See and fleur, wing. Realizing she wasn't fast enough on foot, Robin immediately activated her devil fruit ability. A flurry of arms bloomed from her back, forming majestic and elegant wings. Robin-san. Brook had originally wanted to stop her. After all, Moria was also barreling toward the forest. But before he could take more than a couple steps, Robin had already taken flight, too fast for him to intercept. Within the empty sockets of his skull, Brook's soul fire flared. He clenched his jaw and followed her into the trees. In the forest, Luffy quickly scrambled out of the crater he'd left in the ground. The previous blow, while powerful, hadn't caused any lasting damage. At the last second, he'd unleashed the power of the lightning flame. Though the impact launched him far, most of that force came from the explosive thrust of his own energy. Moria, tracking the path of his punch, had almost reached the impact zone. But the dense foliage made it difficult to pinpoint Luffy's location. Not that Moria cared. The giant's grotesque face glared through the shadows, his eyes gleaming like lanterns, and a crimson maw full of jagged teeth gaped open with bloodlust. His entire bulk thundered forward like a cannonball, charging blindly toward the forest in Luffy's direction. His limbs smashed into the ground with such force that the earth cracked open beneath him, huge fissures spider webbing outward. Feeling the monster's immense presence drawing near, Luffy narrowed his eyes and slammed his palms into the ground. The lightning flame erupted, no longer restrained, blazing outward in a deafening burst of light that ignited the forest around him. Two massive craters formed where his hands had struck, the scorched soil smoldering black with heat. The blast hurled Luffy high into the air, over 100 meters, his body twisting mid-flight as his gaze locked on Moria below. Just as Moria reached the scorched zone, Luffy vanished in a flash of fire. Veteran fighter that he was, Moria instantly spotted the twin craters and looked skyward. There he saw Luffy, plummeting toward him at breakneck speed. Ha ha ha. Moria let out a chilling laugh and swung a monstrous fist skyward. The wind pressure alone screamed through the sky, like a hurricane lashing against the heavens, hurtling toward Luffy like a tidal wave. Luffy brought both hands in front of him, knowing he had no choice but to face it head-on. Funneling his willpower into the armored gloves, now cloaked in haki, they blazed with orange fire that burst forth like a geyser, the heat rippling the air. The X-gloves, now supercharged with mental power energy, ignited like twin suns, illuminating every dark corner of this shadow-covered island. A tremendous force radiated from Luffy's core in all directions, shaking the earth and sky. The overwhelming surge of energy sent chills down the spines of every survivor still left on the island. Boom! The flame blast collided with the incoming punch, unleashing an earth-shattering explosion. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then came the shockwave, blasting outward from the point of impact. Robin, who had just reached the forest, had to fold her wings tight around herself to shield against the storm. High above, Luffy grinned with quiet confidence as he soared through the air. That last full-powered lightning flame had sharpened his control over the fire even further. He realized that if he fled now and recovered, he'd have enough mastery to defeat Moria's full shadow form with ease the next time. But finding a worthy opponent, one who could truly stand toe-to-toe with him, was rare. And in this moment, Luffy had no desire to run. Even if it meant burning through the last of his strength, he wanted to fight to the very end. He looked down at Moria, whose body trembled as he strained to stay upright, eyes locked on Luffy in pure defiance. Maybe he feels the same way. But Moria had no retreat. He was the final line of defense. If he fell, the entire Thriller Bark pirate crew would fall with him. Luffy, on the other hand, had Robin. Even if he lost, she could get them both out alive. Driven by different motives, the two warriors nevertheless reached the same conclusion: go all out. No holding back. Damn it! Moria growled, his face twisted in fury. Maintaining the power of 500 shadows was draining his stamina and mental power. If he kept trading blows like this, he'd collapse first. He had no choice. Doppelman. Some the last of his strength, Moria activated his fruit's ability. A second enormous figure, identical to himself, appeared before him. Moria grinned savagely, jabbing a finger toward the descending Luffy. Get him, Doppelman. The weightless double moved with lightning speed. In a blink, it had crossed 100 meters, flanking Luffy from one side. A flash of violet light gleamed as the two Moria figures prepared to strike. With a feral smile, Moria's short legs burst with explosive power. He launched into the air, dirt and rock blasting from the impact. The Doppelman mirrored him, soaring upward as well. High above, both figures extended their right arms, one real, one spectral. Shadow's Asgard. Moria growled again. His left arm dissolved into shadow, while his double's right arm solidified into a titanic fist. Even before the strike landed, the pressure from the combined fists made it impossible for Luffy to breathe. The two massive punches, each powered by all of Moria's strength, converged on Luffy. Under the suffocating weight of the attack, Luffy realized this was it. If he held back now, he'd lose everything. He shouted at the top of his lungs toward the sky. Robin, get underground. Robin, just about to dive into the fight, froze in midair. Without hesitation, she obeyed. With a flick of her right arm, her wing morphed into a massive fist and punched the ground below, blasting open a pit. Her wings vanished, and she dropped into the crater. As she fell, she created a tunnel of arms that grabbed Brook, who had just arrived, and yanked him into the pit with her. Above, the twin fists loomed, moments from impact. Luffy saw that Robin had taken cover. It wasn't perfect, but he had no time to worry, he had faith in her. As the pressure closed in, he shut his eyes. Arms stretched wide, body suspended upside down in the air, his hair trailing behind him. He poured the last of his willpower into the X gloves. The sapphire gems on the gloves flared with blinding light as waves of unstoppable energy gathered in his palms. Luffy opened his eyes. He bit his lip, face contorted with strain. X-burner. Faced with Moria's devastating two-pronged attack, Luffy unleashed every ounce of his willpower. The lightning flame surged violently through his hands, roaring without restraint. The blazing orange flames shone like divine light, radiating waves of intense heat. Twin beams of searing brilliance pierced the heavens, their overwhelming energy shaking the entire island to its core. In the moment before chaos struck, the calm ripples beneath Luffy's hands became the island's final moment of peace. Then, two colossal beams of flame erupted from his palms, dazzling and furious. They clashed directly with Moria's fists, and in an instant, towering infernos consumed the giant's arms. What? Moria's face twisted in disbelief as he watched the fierce orange fire pour out of Luffy's body. The torrent of flames radiated an oppressive force, as if it alone could suppress the entire world. This power, Moria knew it too well. Years ago, he had once stood against it. Back then, he'd felt powerless, lost, and ultimately, he had lost everything he once held dear. He had escaped the hopelessness of the new world, determined to forget that past. Yet here it was again, this force. This unbearable familiarity. That crushing sense of helplessness. Why? Why now? No one could answer Moria's silent question. An indescribable wave of destruction swept through him. In the final moment before his consciousness faded, as fire devoured his world, he saw a memory flicker in the blaze. His old crew. Laughter ringing through a familiar castle. Goblets raised high, music playing, joy in every corner. They had called him Captain Moria, with genuine respect. No one had cared about his strange appearance. They sat together, side by side, feasting, drinking, laughing with his eerie chuckle, chasing their dreams across the seas. As the illusion faded, Moria surrendered to the overwhelming force, unconscious before he hit the ground. A single tear, rare and silent, vanished into the inferno before it could fall. One by one, shadows drifted out of Moria's body, flying off in all directions. His massive form slowly returned to normal. Eyes rolled back, mouth agape, he plummeted from the sky and crashed hard into the earth. Ah! High above, Luffy screamed in pain. The immense recoil of his final attack overwhelmed him, and he lost control. His arms twisted wildly, his body spinning like a top through the air. The sky was painted in smears of orange and red, scorched by the firestorm still raging from his hands. The twin trails of the lightning flame tore through the clouds, lighting up the night sky as if to tear it apart. The beams scoured the earth, carving molten trenches into the ground. They struck the forest, setting it ablaze in an instant, incinerating trees and wildlife alike. They plunged into the sea, boiling the water, sending enormous waves crashing toward the island. In just 30 seconds, the entire Thriller Bark Island was transformed into a wasteland. The searing heat swept across the terrain, burning away the island's former gloom, and replacing it with the devastation of hell itself. The castle was reduced to rubble. The masts of the ship turned to ash in the flames. From above, Luffy's battered figure plummeted, unconscious and helpless. Mille fleur, gigantsko mono, stomp. Panting heavily, Robin summoned the last reserves of her strength. A massive arm bloomed beneath her, catching Luffy gently from the air and setting him softly before her. Huff. Robin let out a long, shaky breath. Luffy's uncontrolled fire had narrowly missed her and Brook several times. Thankfully, she hadn't joined the fight earlier, so she had just enough stamina left to keep her powers active, and keep them both safe. That was terrifying, Brook muttered, trembling as he crawled out of the crater. He stared at the shattered remains of the castle, the smoking craters, the broken earth, and the forest that had simply ceased to exist. No one would have believed it possible, that someone could reshape an entire island in such a short time. Brook turned to look at Luffy, unconscious with his eyes closed. For the first time, Brook understood what it meant to witness true power. Moria-sama. Elsewhere, deep in the underground operating room, Hogback and Perona had narrowly avoided the island-wide destruction. Sensing the quakes and explosions above, Perona had left her body and sent her mental power to the surface. She was the only one to witness the full scope of Luffy's destructive assault. Once the battlefield quieted, she returned to her body and emerged from the underground chamber, finding Moria unconscious in a deep trench. But Perona wasn't strong enough to move someone of his size, he was like a small giant. She had no choice but to leave her body again to seek Hogback's help. Robin, carrying Luffy to safety, noticed Perona's floating form and instinctively reached out to grab her. But nothing happened. The power of the flower fruit failed for the first time in Robin's memory. Perona noticed Robin too. But still young and untrained in her devil fruit abilities, all she could do was float her negative ghosts around, she had no real offensive power. The two women locked eyes in midair. Each saw the same emotion reflected in the other's gaze, concern for their captain. Neither had any desire, or ability, to fight the other. Without a word, they turned away, silently agreeing to ignore what they'd seen. Around them, the island's magic mist was already beginning to return. Soon, everything would be shrouded in gloom once more. Unaware of the encounter, Brook looked around at the ruins and asked hesitantly, "Robin-san, what do we do now? 40 years without seeing another living person, and now this." His bony heart still raced from the shock. "We take Luffy back to the ship," Robin said, concerned. The last time he pushed himself like this, he slept for 3 days and woke up fully recovered. Hopefully, this time won't be longer. She lifted Luffy in a gentle bridal carry and started walking. "Oh," Brook murmured, then fell silent, unsure what to say. "Am I going back to drifting alone again?" He wondered. The thought terrified him. There was no way he'd stay here by himself. As he wavered, Robin suddenly glanced back. "By the way," she said, "have you thought any more about what we talked about earlier?" Brook blinked. What do you mean?" "Joining our pirate crew," Robin said softly. With Luffy unconscious, she felt responsible for carrying out his intentions. That," Brook stammered, flustered. "That wasn't just a joke." He couldn't believe it. Why would someone so strong want someone like him? Robin tilted her head, pretending to think it over. "I don't know about the rest," she said slowly, "but Luffy told me himself, he was serious about recruiting new crewmates. I don't think he was joking at all." Her words struck Brook like spring rain on parched earth. Even without Luffy saying it directly, if Robin believed it, then it had to be true. 40 years of loneliness melted away, like an iceberg dissolving into the sea. With renewed mental power, Brook blushed, somehow, on his skeletal cheeks and eagerly stepped forward. "Robin-san, let me carry him. Get lost." The warmth in Brook's heart froze over in an instant, like a river turned to ice by an ancient frost. Robin's glare sent shivers down his spine, if he had one. Even in death, he had never felt so close to dying. The fog was like a master sorcerer, turning the sea into an endless purgatory. Thick, enchanted mist engulfed the world, completely obscuring everything above the sea. The once proud thriller bark, no, it could hardly be called a ship now. The sails were long gone, and what remained was merely a nameless island adrift in the Florian's Triangle. Robin and Luffy's massive vessel was docked beside Brook's ghost ship, both anchored securely at the island's port. Heavy iron chains wrapped around a massive stone pillar ensured neither ship would drift away. For the past 2 days, Robin had stayed by Luffy's side, nursing him back to health with great care. She quietly imagined that when he awoke, she would be the first thing he saw. Occasionally, she would chat with Brook. After all, Luffy had invited him to join their crew. To Robin, that already made him one of them. Surprisingly, despite being 90 years old, Brook got along with Robin quite well. Over those 2 days, Robin learned many stories from Brook, lost legends and historical tidbits that no modern record had preserved. Though some were outdated, they held significant research value. Meanwhile, in the ruined castle's underground infirmary, Hogback was tirelessly tending to Moria and Absalom, swapping out their bandages and applying fresh medicine. Absalom's back had been completely shattered by debris, his muscles torn to shreds. Luckily, his internal organs hadn't been too badly damaged, and the infirmary still had a supply of fresh corpses. Using his uncanny medical skill, Hogback had grafted a new back onto Absalom. As long as he regained his strength and consciousness, he would recover fully. With Absalom stabilized, Hogback turned his attention to the barely clinging to life Moria. 2 days ago, he and Perona had managed to haul Moria's charred body out of the massive ravine. Moria's body had been blackened by fire, with over 60% of his flesh cooked beyond recognition, devoid of any sign of life. Standing at Moria's bedside, Hogback prepped his surgical tools while muttering to himself, "What a terrifying monster, to burn Moria-sama like this, no." Perhaps what's even scarier is that Moria-sama survived with only 60% of his body burned. What kind of creature is that Luffy? Hogback couldn't comprehend the world of true power. It was far beyond him. But it didn't matter, his surgical skills were unmatched. The moment he first examined Moria's condition, he'd almost declared him dead on the spot. Never before had he seen someone breathe after suffering such extensive full-body burns. But upon hearing the faint heartbeat, he immediately enlisted Perona's help. In her ghost form, she thoroughly examined Moria's internal condition and relayed every detail. Before turning pirate, Hogback had been known by another title, the world's most brilliant surgeon. Though he'd long since vanished from public life, that title still held weight in the medical world. And when it came to surgery, skill spoke louder than reputation. With painstaking precision, Hogback began cutting away the dead flesh inside Moria's body. Relying on Moria's formidable vitality and regenerative powers, Hogback worked without sleep for 2 days, removing damaged tissue bit by bit. Once new flesh began to grow, he'd move on to the next area. 2 days later, the exhausted surgeon finally earned a brief rest. Moria's internal organs and protective tissue had regenerated. The remaining injuries only required standard procedures and time. The title of Genius Surgeon was well deserved. But while Hogback rested, Luffy slowly opened his eyes. A familiar ceiling. Just as he expected, Luffy had never once doubted he would survive. He had faith, both in himself and in Robin. Seeing the familiar ceiling above, he understood everything. "You're awake, Luffy." A gentle voice drifted over to him. Luffy turned his head to find Robin sitting beside the bed, dressed in a clean white shirt, a book in her hands, one Luffy had never seen before. The moment she noticed him awake, Robin closed the book and set it down, then gracefully picked up a cup of warm water. She smiled tenderly, as though she'd rehearsed this moment countless times. "Thanks," Luffy said calmly, taking the cup from her. Even though Robin had already fed him water and food while he was unconscious, something about taking it himself made the moment feel more satisfying. He gulped it all down in 2 big swigs. Before he could say anything else, Robin spoke again with another gentle smile. "Dinner's already prepared. It's not quite time to reheat it again, so it might be a little cold." "That's great. You're amazing, Robin." At the mention of food, Luffy sprang up instantly and headed toward the dining room. But the moment he opened the door, he was greeted by an unexpected sight, a skeleton in formal wear, nervously standing outside. Luffy turned back to Robin in confusion. Robin tilted her head and smiled sweetly, saying nothing. Brook rubbed his skeletal fingers together, nervous yet polite. Luffy-san, hello. My name is Brook. I'm a user of the Revive fruit, which grants one chance at resurrection after death. Unfortunately, my soul got lost on the way back and couldn't find my body for a long time. That's why I look like this now. Brook's introduction had clearly been prepared, but as he neared the end, he stuttered and struggled to continue. Brook agreed to join us, Robin said gently from behind Luffy, stepping in to ease Brook's tension. Brook stood stiffly, visibly flustered. For some reason, he feared being rejected by Luffy, like it would cost him something deeply important. Luckily, things turned out just as he had hoped. "Aw, really? That's awesome, Brook. Come on, let's go eat." Luffy beamed, bursting into laughter. Maybe it was because he already knew Brook from the original timeline, or maybe he just genuinely liked him, but Luffy casually threw an arm over Brook's shoulder, and the two headed to the dining room together like old friends. Robin's eyes flashed with a strange glint, feeling like all her thoughtful efforts had been a bit unnecessary. Brook, oblivious to her irritation, was overjoyed. Being acknowledged by Luffy made the world feel beautiful again. Even the gloomy fog above seemed like a graceful veil that added a dreamy charm to the sky. Ding! The host has acquired a fourth crew member. Please access the crew system to draw a unique item for your new companion.